Greetings, friends. This video is a critique of atheism and an argument for spirituality. The two terms, atheism and spirituality, are mutually exclusive. In a previous video, I critiqued atheism as well as agnosticism, which I see as a cop-out from seeking the truth. And in that video, I also critiqued religious fundamentalism with its herd mentality. However, the herd mentality is mimicked by the scientific materialists, or atheists, today, for the reason that it's easy to go with the flow in any time in history. Of course, now the West is a lot less religiously fundamentalist as it would have been 150 years ago, or even 100 years ago. This is different in places like Latin America and Africa, but certainly in Europe and North America, people go to church far less. We're not nearly practicing Christians as we would have been 100 years ago. Now, in that same previous video, I praised something I like to call level-headedness, which I see as going your own way and finding a healthy balance between these two extremes. On the one hand, I believe in no deity. On the other hand, I do not believe that the world is essentially material. I believe in spirituality. What is the deal with atheists? So many people online call themselves atheists, and I just find it fascinating. Why do so many people call themselves atheists? If you call yourself an atheist, are you from the United States? Are you around a lot of religious people? Do you live in a community with lots of evangelists, perhaps, and maybe have they insulted you or told you shouldn't do something because it offends God? So I can sympathize, because I've heard that about 35% of Americans are still practicing Christians. It's different in Canada. I don't know what it would be like in a rural area, but certainly I grew up in Toronto, the biggest city in Canada, and I've never been around religious people. I mean, I've never was forced to study any religion or, Christianity, and certainly not, and I was certainly never around any religious people until later on, maybe in my 20s, and a lot of the most religious people I've met have been Americans or Mormons. So yeah, maybe I'm wondering, it's like, are you calling yourself an atheist if you are an atheist? I mean, I'm not necessarily addressing just atheists. I'm addressing people who are interested in spirituality too. And I agree that maybe atheists won't watch this video because I'm basically critiquing it. But I'm confused. I'm just trying to understand. I try to think I'm a thinking person. I'm trying to understand why is it a reaction to just this religious fundamentalism which still exists in a lot of the world. And I agree that a lot of this fundamentalism posits a deity, posits some sort of God, small g God, not a very abstract God, kind of a jealous God or a God that acts kind of irrationally. So I can understand if it's a reaction to being around too many people like that. You just say, oh, I've had enough of this and I'm an atheist. So okay, I can meet you, kind of meet you there. I kind of get that. But I feel like at the same time, every religion in the world has crazy people. You can't ignore that. Just because there's people who take something too seriously doesn't mean that there's no diamonds in the ball of turd or no gemstones in the mud bank. Because and other people have used that metaphor. I'm kind of stealing that. But when talking of this question of religion and spirituality, like I've critiqued Islam, of course. I believe it encourages violence, but of course, sure, there's going to be teachings in Islam which are peaceful as well and have a good influence on the world, just as there's certain teachings in Christianity. Don't you think it's a good idea that thou shalt do unto others as you would have them do unto you? I mean, seems kind of common sense. So just because there's some other crazy ideas get focused on, like this bizarre notion of the Holy Trinity, I don't understand that either. That doesn't mean that everything in the Bible is just complete bullshit. So yeah, like I said, I was never forced into religion. I kind of came to it not religion really, but spirituality of my own interest once I was a teenager and later on. So yes, I am a spiritual person. I believe in the power of thought, and I guess emotion too. I believe the way you feel and the way you focus your thoughts can affect your body, can affect the physical world. And I'll wager that there is a greater being. I mean, it's consciousness, light, love, but also evil, darkness, and yet myself too. And I'm not trying to really be too mystical here. I mean, I'm just contained in the universe. We're all contained in the universe. The universe produced us as a way of kind of knowing itself in a certain way, the way that animals can't know an animal knows the world in a certain way, but it's certainly humans have a much higher developed ability to perceive the earth and to perceive sound and music and do all the things that we do. I mean, we're still part of the universe. We're still an expression of the universe, of that great consciousness, that vibration. So, I might use the word universe interchangeably with God, or even, a term like Great Spirit. That sounds kind of like what Native Americans use that term, or at least in popular culture, it's associated with Native Americans using that term, Great Spirit. But I like it. It just sounds good. But really, no deities like Jesus Christ, or well, not Jesus Christ, but a deity like Allah or Vishnu or something like that. These are not necessary for me to worship. These don't need to exist in my view of spirituality, my view of the universe. But on the other hand, we shouldn't dismiss that perhaps in the religious traditions, these deities were actually extraterrestrials. There are reasons to suggest that could have been going on in the Sumerian epics, certainly in the Vedas, all the time, maybe even in the Greek mythology too. Who were all these gods coming out from the sky with their highly developed craft and their vimanas and all their superhuman powers, yet they were still breeding with humans and making humans? What was going on there? I mean, I've talked a little bit about that in a previous video. So that's another problem. That's the one reason why I can't go all the way to meet the atheists who are just dismissing the theists, who are just dismissing the deities, because you have to understand that the Bible was heavily rearranged from what the Sumerian story was. Okay, these Anunnaki, and you can look at different traditions too. You start to actually get into a kind of a different conception than just a magical being. It tends to be like literally giants. What does the Bible mean where in Genesis they just say, and there were giants on the earth in those days? It says something to the effect of, and there were giants on the earth in those days. No explanation. Yeah, so now having said this, I've kind of critiqued the atheists here, and I'm critiquing these culty religious fundamentalists, but I also have to critique a separate category of people. You can separate these people from the scientific materialists and the religious fundamentalists, like the evangelists or the devout Catholics or even devout Muslims. There's another category in the West, particularly, and I mean the so-called New Agers, who I guess do come close to what I define myself as, because I think they also call themselves spiritual. And perhaps some of them are spiritual, but I think if you watch how a lot of these people act, these so-called New Agey people, a lot of them are actually, it's very superficial. And underneath, deep down, they're not actually acting with much love or compassion towards other human beings. And you can usually spot them in terms of the group dynamics. And, generally I'm suspicious of groups in general. I mean, I'm suspicious of generally any group of people bigger than 5. I think you can start to get a cult mentality once you get to 8, 9 people. You can have a little cult going on. So you see these with what I don't mean to dismiss all of the people who do yoga. I mean, I like yoga stretches too. I don't see the point of doing yoga in a room with other people. That's kind of strange to me. I like, do it. I meditate privately. I do yoga privately. I don't need to do it in a park. I don't need to do it in front of other people. That's interesting to me. When people make an ostentatious display of their, it's kind of like I'm holier than thou in its own way. Oh, there's so many ways of characterizing this, like your past lives, or there's just so yeah, a lot of these gurus and all that bullshit from India, seeking higher wisdom. Yeah, a lot of it is charlatans and people who are just really troubled and angry, and they've run off and come to the spiritual retreat, and it's all a charade. So that's another category we have to realize that sort of doesn't do my argument for spirituality any good. It doesn't help my argument. I agree. But look at these people. Look at how they act. Sure, you can see how what a cult is when you watch how they act and you watch their group dynamics. Yeah, so I believe a lot of it has to do with resentment on some level. People have resentment. I'm using it loosely, maybe not in quite the way Nietzsche used it, but there is a sort of a resentment that I believe maybe these New Agers have that cause them to be very superficial and act how they do. They really have just negativity within them. And I believe that sort of resentment can be shared maybe with the scientific materialists or the atheists. Now, I think maybe in some ways these atheists are even like more resentful than the religious fundamentalists, at least nowadays, or so it may seem to me at times. I mean, I can't say that's a fact. In most disagreements that I have had with other people throughout my life, having animated discussions, usually I find religious people generally to be a bit more peaceful. I mean, they can argue with you to a point, but they're still kind of like, okay, well, that's fine. I believe what I believe, and but on the other hand, discussing with materialists, scientific materialists, they can become pretty rabid and vehement in their views. It can honestly, I just think it's because they have a lot of pride, because they have more education, they've gone to university, and they think that means something. And they speak with condescension, more condescension. And yeah, just the mere mentioning of like questioning their viewpoint can inspire a lot of anger, because it's like, no, I have the sense, I have the truth. We've already thrown out religion. What are you doing? Why are you trying to bring up this question again? It's like the mere mention of that I'm trying to bring it up again. It's like, it's just this knee-jerk reaction. Like, no, you must be burned at the stake right now. I think it's interesting because when Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, was writing in the later 19th century, and he was writing about this issue of resentment, more generally he was talking about religious fundamentalists at that time. He was talking about how people get caught up in this power structure and they come to accept the power structure. They accept that they are sinners before God, and so that it fills them with resentment towards people who are perceived as powerful or kind of come to be seen as bad people, as sinners, and it is the good people who are also the ones who suffer. It's really pathetic. It's really distorted. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's just it doesn't make sense. So these it may have been the religious people who were more the resentful ones back then, but now I think it's actually the masses, which the materialist masses, at least the educated ones, who have more resentment today. And the resentment has to do with they've on some level they know that they've also bought into an ideology, or at least a culture. They've also bought into a steaming pile of shit, right? Because their view is also pretty self-defeating. Now, if you're an atheist, do you simply believe in no deities, as I asked? Like I said, I can kind of meet you there. but the extraterrestrial question muddles matters. So you have to consider that. However, if you're an atheist in the sense that you believe generally that there is no mind or soul apart from the brain, and that there is no life before birth and no life after death, well, I can't agree with you there. And I know that a lot of atheists would fit into that category. I think it kind of comes as like a natural extension. Maybe not with all atheists. If you disagree, let me know. But I think a lot of atheists fit into this latter category. Generally, just dismissing the whole thing. It's like you know what? Screw not just screw this Bible. Let's just throw out the whole question of a soul, or even a mind apart from your brain. Just like throw it out. Why they do this, I don't know. It seems kind of crazy. Yes, of course I believe in some kind of soul or mind that exists apart from the brain. And so I believe in life after death. The word believe is kind of funny. I mean, it can mean a lot of different things. I mean, I sense that there is a life after death. I feel it. It seems intuitive. At least on one hand, it seems intuitive. It feels right that there should be life after death, that I was somewhere else before I came into this body. It feels true. It's comforting. I admit, yes. And I guess you can say, oh, well, it's just an opiate and it's just making you feel good and it does not, well, okay. But, I mean, look, this gives a very clear reason to get up in the morning, the fact that there's life after death. I mean, what aware soul, or let's just say mind, what aware mind, an awake mind, an intellectually open mind on the planet, who among these awake minds can live a fulfilling life while thinking that it's all for nothing? Really? That there's no reward in the end? Everything goes black. Swoosh! You're dead. That's it. Gone. Nada. Zilch. That's it. Well, fair enough. So I may ask you, why do you get up in the morning? I ask that question of other people, and I don't usually get a response. I just get this. I get attacked, but I want to know why you get up in the morning, like as opposed to get up and not just throw yourself in a bus right immediately to end your life, or as opposed to just lying there and not eating or drinking. I may ask you, like, when you feel love, do you not sense something else beyond yourself? Or do you just say, oh, this love is just a feeling, it's just certain neural peptides entering my bloodstream right now? Or if you have children, I may ask you, where do you imagine they came from and where are they going after you're gone? Do you think they're just going to go into the blackness too? That's it? Why do you care for them then? What's the point of having them at all? Why not just become a hedonist and, what do they say? Like, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die? If you produce art, and if you contemplate art, have you no sense of something more to the here and now? Some other mind, anything? Isn't that what we're trying to get at in art? Isn't that what it was always about? If you're this kind of atheist who dismisses any soul or mind beyond the brain, how do you light your world? From where do you get your warmth? What kind of story do you tell yourself about your life? I don't understand how you would make meaning. I suspect that you're kidding yourselves, but if you're not, then I'd love to hear how you respond to these things. So for me, I mean, it's quite implicit that we humans are in a spiritual existence on this earth. That's not to say that everything is spiritual and we have to be meditating all the time. I mean, no, of course, physical reality has some truth. And yes, things are solid and we're here and things smell and we have pain and all of these real things. I'm just saying that we have good reason to accept that at least some aspect of ourselves will continue after this body decays. And of course, we should not just be satisfied with our gut feeling, if we indeed have this gut feeling that I imagine many people must, but maybe not everyone has, this gut feeling that yes, there is meaning, and yes, I am on the planet for a reason, and yes, there is a story I am a part of, and this is never the end. At the same time, okay, let's do science. We should always do science. Anyone self-respecting and responsible should always look to the science. This is the biggest issue for me with how atheists continue to call themselves atheists when we actually look at the science. So if you're an atheist of the variety I've described that simply dismisses the soul or the spirit, then I ask of you, how do you respond to these following matters? Number one, decades of research into the paranormal. I don't just mean ghosts and apparitions. I mean telekinesis, telepathy, all the traditions of shamans and shamanism around the world. And these shamans can locate lost objects, communicate with spirits. Or number two, how do you respond to the assertion that governments and militaries have used or continue to use remote viewing? And by remote viewing, I mean detaching some aspect of your conscious mind and observing a facility or an individual in another part of the planet or beyond. Or number three, how do you respond to the assertion of quantum physics, which shows that the physical world is essentially non-physical, and that observation, human observation, has a real effect on the world, albeit subtle, as was demonstrated in the double-slit experiment. Or number four, everything about dreaming. Or number five, all the research that has been done into near-death experiences, all those documented cases of very similar experiences. So as an atheist of that dismisses all those things, like how do you also respond to the fact that your atheism is quite recent in history? Do you address as mere primitive fools every cultural tradition in every corner of the world that has preceded you? Because they've all held some fundamental truth of the existence of a soul or some kind of being which exists apart from the body. So there are really many different reasons that I'm confused with people who call themselves atheists. As I've shown, there's a psychological dimension to the question. Like, how can you get by in your daily life if you really accept the most materialist evolutionist perspective? And I'll give that there's different ways you can look at evolution, but if you really accept the most cold materialist picture that you're just an ape and you're just trying to pass on your genes soon enough and you'll pass into blackness. If you really accept that, I'm fascinated in the psychology of how you go about your daily life. I'm fascinated in what makes you tick. I'm fascinated. In addition, how can these atheists use science when the science repeatedly shows the opposite, that there is some real justification to speak of the mind, spirit, or soul? The whole atheism thing just doesn't add up. However, I understand if you're reacting to being around too many theistic people, especially evangelists in the US, I can understand why you might be attracted to the thought of atheism. I just hope that you can see through the muddle and find a level-headed conclusion, which involves spirit, because I think that's very, very clear and intuitive. All right, amigos. Hasta luego.